Few figures in American history have combined intellectual brilliance and spiritual fire as Jonathan Edwards did. A philosopher, a pastor, and a preacher of terrifying clarity, he became the unlikely instrument of one of the most significant revivals the American colonies ever witnessed. He did not seek fame, he sought God. And in seeking God, he helped awaken a generation. He was born October 5, 1703, in East Windsor, Connecticut, the only son among 11 children born to Timothy and Esther Edwards. His father was a minister, and his maternal grandfather, Solomon Stoddard, was the most influential pastor in the Connecticut River Valley. Edwards grew up surrounded by scripture, serious theology, and earnest prayer. He was an academic prodigy. He entered Yale College at 13, graduated at 17, and by his early 20s had developed a theological mind that would eventually rival the greatest thinkers of his age. Yet for all his learning, the matter of his own soul occupied him most. As a boy, he had experienced seasons of religious feeling that faded as quickly as they came. Then, in 1721, at 18 years old, something changed. Reading 1 Timothy 1:17, he later wrote,
"As I read the words, there came into my soul, and was, as it were, diffused through it, a sense of the glory of the divine being, a new sense, quite different from anything I ever experienced before."
From that moment, the pursuit of God became the consuming passion of his life. In 1727, Edwards was ordained as assistant pastor alongside his grandfather at the church in Northampton, Massachusetts. When his grandfather died 2 years later, Edwards took the pulpit alone. He inherited a large congregation with habits that troubled him. It was a community that had grown comfortable with a Christianity that asked little. He began to preach with precision and weight. His sermons were dense, carefully reasoned, and aimed directly at the conscience. He did not shout. He rarely gestured. He often held his manuscripts close and simply read them in a measured, deliberate voice. But the content cut through. Truth, clearly seen, needed no oratorical display. In the mid-1730s, a quiet but unmistakable stirring began in Northampton that would become known as the Great Awakening. People who had long sat unmoved in the pews began to weep. Conversations about eternal things broke out in homes and on the streets. Young people who had seemed indifferent to religion were suddenly gripped by concern for their souls. Edwards watched it carefully, recorded it faithfully, and wrote about it in his 1737 account, a faithful narrative of the surprising work of God. That document traveled across the Atlantic and kindled hope in ministers as far away as England and Scotland. Then in 1740, George Whitefield arrived in New England. The two men were different in almost every way. Whitefield was dramatic, restless, thunderous. Edwards was quiet, settled, methodical. But they recognized in each other the same seriousness about the gospel. When Whitefield came to Northampton, Edwards wept as he listened to him preach. Whitefield noted it. The friendship between them was brief but significant, and the revival that swept through New England in those years owed something to them both. The most remembered moment of Edwards' preaching came on July 8, 1741, in Enfield, Connecticut. He had been invited to preach and brought with him a sermon he had already preached elsewhere. The title was "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God." He read it quietly, without any theatrical inflection. But before he finished, men in the congregation were said to be gripping the pews and the pillars, crying out, convinced they were sliding into hell. Edwards had to ask for quiet so he could continue. The sermon was not notable for its volume. It was notable for its vision. In it, he declared,
"There is nothing that keeps wicked men at any one moment out of hell, but the mere pleasure of God."
Edwards painted a picture of divine holiness and human guilt so vivid, so logically airtight, that the hearers felt the ground give way beneath their feet. Revival brought opposition as well as fruit. Edwards found himself in conflict with portions of his congregation over the question of who should be admitted to the Lord's Supper. His grandfather had practiced open communion, allowing the unconverted to participate. Edwards came to believe this was wrong, holding that communion was for the professing believer, not the spiritually undecided. The congregation disagreed. After a prolonged and painful conflict, they voted to dismiss him in 1750. He had served them for 23 years. At 46 years old, he had a wife and 11 children, but no pulpit. He accepted a call to the frontier town of Stockbridge, Massachusetts, to serve as missionary pastor to a small congregation of settlers and a branch of the Mohican Nation known as the Westonhoek that lived in the Housatonic Valley. There, in a remote and humble setting, with fewer distractions and simpler demands, he did some of the most significant theological writing of his career. There he was able to complete freedom of the will, the great Christian doctrine of original sin defended, the nature of true virtue, and concerning the end for which God created the world. The dismissed pastor had become one of the most productive theological writers in American history. In 1757, he was invited to become president of the College of New Jersey, later known as Princeton. He was reluctant, fearing the administrative burden would consume the writing he felt called to finish. But the trustees pressed, and he accepted, traveling to Princeton in early 1758. He did not last the year. A smallpox inoculation in March of 1758 produced complications. Within weeks, he was gravely ill. On March 22, 1758, Jonathan Edwards died. He was 54 years old. Among his last recorded words, spoken to his daughter, were these:
"Trust in God, and you need not fear."
He left behind a body of work that has never gone out of circulation. His sermons, his treatises, his personal writings, and his accounts of revival shaped American Christianity and Reformed theology in ways that continue to the present day. But the work was not his. He said so himself. In his personal narrative, he wrote of his deepest longing:
"To lie low before God as in the dust, that I might be nothing, and that God might be all."
That is not the ambition of a man building a legacy. That is the prayer of a man who has seen the glory of God and found everything else insufficient by comparison. Jonathan Edwards did not light the fire of the Great Awakening, and he would have been the first to say so. He simply held the kindling close to the flame that God had already prepared, and the light that followed awakened a continent.